Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program Greg Boring, who is VP of Sales at Kenco Group. And today we're going to talk about the new value equation in contract logistics. Now, there's so much going on in the supply chain logistics industry, whether it's from the technology side, whether it's from the business model side, things like omni-channel that are impacting companies in retail, as an example. Regulations, so many different factors that impact, supply chain and logistics operations today that kind of suggest that there probably is a new value equation required when it comes to, working with third-party logistics partners and kind of the expectation, what are the new expectations that customers have? What are some of the new capabilities and services and kind of the value that service providers need to be positioned, to provide in this, ever-changing environment. So it's great to have Greg on the program. He's obviously in the front lines of this every day, working with clients and talking to, executives in a variety of different industries. So good to kind of get a pulse on what's happening in the market. So Greg, thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
So Greg, we've had some of your colleagues on Talking Logistics before, but this is your first time. So every time we bring a new guest onto the program, I always like to kind of get an understanding of how and why you got involved in the industry. So why don't we start there? Just really briefly, tell us a little bit about your career path, again, how and why you got involved in supply chain logistics, and what your current role and responsibilities are there at Kenco.
Sure. I actually started off my career in the transportation industry with Yellow Freight System. I entered their management trainee program, and I got a industrial engineering degree. So after about a year in that program, I moved into their IE department for a few years after that. I moved then into distribution with Georgia Pacific was my next stop, and that really introduced me to warehousing in their building products and distribution division, managing customer service and the routing departments at a facility they had outside of Atlanta. Then moved over to UPS Supply Chain Solutions, and that really broadened my horizons in what a 3PL can do. Held various roles there in terms of solution design, pricing, program manager. Was there for a little over 6 years prior to coming to Kenco. I've been here at Kenco a little over 11 years now. Started off in the sales group, which was my first role in sales in my career, primarily focusing on growing business with our existing customers. I then moved into operations for about 4 years. I was managing 2 customer networks that we have, and moved into my role that I'm in now, which is VP of Sales, just about 5 years ago.
Great. Diversity of roles and responsibilities there is not only from the 3PL side, but also the shipper side as well with Georgia Pacific there. So let's start, let's get to the topic at hand now. And let's start by discussing the various factors that continue to transform the value equation in contract logistics, beginning with, customer expectations, obviously. So how are customer expectations different today than, say, 5 or 10 years ago? And, what's driving these expectations?
I really think, Adrian, that customers are, they're more educated now in terms of what they expect of their 3PLs. I think for the most part, gone are the days where a customer could hire a 3PL, and as long as they're receiving and shipping their product and doing an okay job, they can fly under the radar. Customers are expecting 3PLs to come in and have robust continuous improvement programs, to be up to date on the latest technologies, to be in innovation and thought leaders, to drive year-over-year cost improvements. So I think our customers really have raised the bar on us. And in terms of you mentioned what do I think is driving those expectations? I think in a lot of ways, it's their customers are now dictating the way that they want their product shipped and delivered to them. We all know that e-commerce has exploded, and that makes warehouse operations, or it can make warehouse operations, more complex. I think in a lot of cases where a customer may have shipped full pallet or full case quantities, now they're having to ship eaches, they're having to perform kitting functions or other value-added services, and now having to ship to their customers' homes. And as I said, that typically requires more labor, more automation, more sophistication around material handling and storage equipment. They're now getting involved with having to deal with parcel and LTL carriers, where previously they may have dealt primarily with truckload. So I think that's added complexity to the industry, which and I think our customers have continued to educate themselves and have become more knowledgeable as they've basically have had to increase their ability to serve their client the way their clients want to be served. And they're looking for us to be able to not only guide them through that process, but help them continue to improve it year over year.
Yeah, that's great. There's a couple of things you said there that kind of, piqued my interest. The first thing is that it sounds like, companies are approaching, their 3PL partners or prospective partners, in a much more sophisticated way than they have in the past. I remember, talking to 3PL executives in the past, and they said, the red flags always go up when we're talking to a customer or a prospective customer, and they really don't know what their strategy is. They really don't know what they're looking for in the partnership. And that's always, raises a lot of red flags and potential risk, because if the customer doesn't know where they want to go and what their strategy is, it's going to be very, very difficult to you as a partner to help them get there, right? So I think it sounds like that's part of what you said there. And I think the other interesting piece is I think it's what's driving a lot of the expectations. It's not so much, or in addition to your immediate customer, it's your customer's customer as well. And then that's certainly true in the retail side for sure, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Most of our customers are having to learn how to be omni-channel shippers, where in the past they were shipping to distributors, they were shipping to retail, they weren't really having to mix and match or ship. Now they're having to not only do both of those things, but ship to customer homes as well.
Yep. You mentioned technology, and that's certainly another factor, that's influencing the value equation. And, I like to say that 3PLs have gone from, being providers of logistics, services that are enabled by technology to in many ways becoming technology and business intelligence providers that are enabled by logistics services. Do you agree that technology is playing a more prominent role in the value equation today? And if so, in what ways?
Well, first of all, yes, I definitely do. And I think a lot of it is driven by, again, I'm probably mention e-commerce a few times here today, because I think it's really had a big impact on the way that we do, the way that we go to market, the way that we do business. So a combination of shortening cycle times. More and more customers are wanting a shorter cycle time. And what I mean by that is from the time my order is placed until the time I get the product, we want to continue to reduce that cycle time, and just having visibility to where the order is throughout that process. Obviously with e-commerce customers, if you order something, most customers want to be able to track it from the time the order is placed to the time it's in the warehouse being picked until the time it's shipped, and then it enters into the small parcel or LTL or whomever the carrier is, and being able to track it for delivery. So I think visibility is driving a lot of the demands around technology, but not just with the folks who are ordering things on Amazon or other customer websites, but also with our customers directly. We developed a business intelligence tool a few years ago that the way I describe it to customers is all those spreadsheets and access databases and charts and graphs that are on walls in a general manager's office. Those are now automated and at their fingertips via a web-based login. So it accesses our WMS, it accesses our payroll and other information, so that the customer can get a dashboard of what their key performance indicators are, how much of SKU XYZ do they have in the facility, what's my cycle time, how's my service today. And they have really taken to that. And I think what's driven that a lot is because more and more customers are seeing their supply chain as a strategic advantage instead of a cost of doing business. And that, I think that's why visibility has gotten that much more important. So really technology is driving, like I said, improving efficiencies, reducing cycle time, as well as increasing visibility.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the way I see it and the way I hear it sometimes from some of the shippers that I talk to is that, the flow of information, the flow of insight is as valuable and some would argue probably even more valuable than the actual flow of goods, right? And to be able to get that information, those insights, in a timely, accurate, and complete manner is absolutely critical for for them, because they're tasked with trying to make smarter decisions faster themselves, in terms of, you've got data that they need, that you've got insights that they need, that then they want to marry up with, demand data that they have, or data that they have from other sources. And it's the accumulation and the gathering of those data and being able to do analysis on top of that. That's, what they're looking for. So in some ways they're almost looking to, you mentioned, BI reports and dashboards, and I think that those have all been very helpful. Are you seeing companies kind of even taking a step further? They say, we just want to like plug into your database and just dump all this data right into our database so that we can start doing, more of that analysis, so that we can combine it with all these other data sources as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing I failed to mention on our BI tool is it's got a pretty robust reporting tool as well. There's some canned reports, but there's also the ability to develop ad hoc reports. And we've had customers tell us that they're able to access their information, or access information regarding how their distribution network is performing better through our tools than anything they had internally. So, I mean, you're right. Knowledge is power. I mean, we've all probably heard the saying that the fastest way to improve a process is to measure and report on it, and it's going to improve. And that's where the power of the data comes in. Right.
Kind of shifting gears a little bit. I mean, we've seen a lot of, mergers and acquisitions in the industry in recent years, a lot of blockbuster deals, a lot of smaller deals, but just a lot of M&A, overall. I mean, what's driving, this activity from your perspective, kind of being in the industry? And is this part of, the value equation, trying to be everything to everyone and trying to do it all for all customers? Is that part of it now?
It very well could be. 2015 was just crazy in terms of the M&A activity. There was almost $19 billion of M&A activity just in 2015 alone, and it really hasn't slowed down much. You mentioned why. I think there's a few different reasons. To start with, the logistics and transportation industry has always been very fragmented. There has never been a dominant one or two or three players that have the predominance of the market share. So there's hundreds or thousands of companies out there that might have a fraction of the market. So it was fragmented to start with. But then, other things that have driven it, at least the way I believe, is companies, especially larger users of 3PL services, are putting pressure on their 3PL providers to acquire additional services, because they want those 3PLs to be more of a one-stop shop for them, because they maybe want to shrink down the number of 3PLs that they're using. So I think there's that's having some impact. Obviously, geographic expansion is a big part of it as well. Just an easy example, and I'm going to probably mispronounce it, but we all know, or most of us know, that Norbert Dentressangle, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, purchased Jacobson because they wanted to improve their footprint in North America. And then XPO turns around and purchases Norbert because XPO wanted to increase their footprint in Europe, and as well as Geodis purchasing OHL to get more of a North American footprint. So I think that's part of it as well. And then from a financial standpoint, a lot of 3PLs took a big hit during the recession, and with as the economy did as well. And as the economy has begun to improve in recent years and more goods are moving, 3PLs, trucking companies are doing better. They're more cash rich, so they're more they're a more attractive target. And there's been a lot of private equity that's been in the market as well. And as we know, private equity firms will purchase companies and reorganize them, try and improve their performance and spin them off. And I think we're seeing some of that happen as well. And just, again, I mentioned the economy, but with the economy improving, I think more and more companies are wanting to expand their services, expanding their geographic footprint, expanding their service portfolio so that they can better take advantage of it. But at the same time, I mean, I guess there's always a but, because it sounds like, why isn't everybody doing it? There is substantial research that shows that less than half of mergers and acquisitions actually produce the benefits that were expected. And there's several reasons for that. But so, I mean, it's a risk reward. Some have worked out well and some have not.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think another point I remember, talking to executives as well. I mean, I guess to put it simply, bigger is not always necessarily mean better, right? And I think what the way I've characterized the industry becoming is almost like barbell shaped. You've got at the one end of the barbell, strategies that are about increasing that geographic footprint, increasing that services footprint, et cetera, right? And then at the other end of the barbell, you've got providers that are really more hyper-focused, if you will, on particular specialties or vertical industries or specialties, whether it's e-commerce, as you mentioned, or it might be a particular vertical industry, or it might be just a geographical region to kind of really go deep in that particular area. And it seems to me that that's, you've got good strategic reasons to go one way or the other, right? But I think at the end of the day, as customers, you still have to do your due diligence in terms of what is it that going back to the first question that we talked about, what is it that what are your expectations? What is it that you're looking for in a partner? And that's really what ought to drive, the relationship, right? And the decision to move forward with a particular partner. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, that's a great point. And really we recommend when a customer is considering outsourcing, first of all, you need to decide, you need to decide what do you want to accomplish from that. But then when you start talking to potential 3PL partners, I think one of the first things you need to ask them is, are you potentially going to be acquired, or are you looking to acquire other companies? Because that's one of the reasons that many mergers and acquisitions have failed, is because the customers of the acquired companies have left for various reasons. Either they haven't performed the way they were before the acquisition, or maybe more often that customer starts to feel like a small fish in a very big pond, and they're not getting the attention that they feel like they should. So culture is huge, and especially if it's a multinational company that's acquiring a regional player, it could look and feel a lot differently, a 3PL could, after it's acquired, than it does when you sign up to do business with it before the acquisition happens.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think we could probably devote a whole episode to talking about the importance of culture and cultural alignment. But maybe it feeds into my next question. I mean, I'm sure that the value equation, varies by customer that you deal with. But how do you and your clients, go about identifying, what is the value potential that we have here? How do you go about measuring it, and then ideally, sustain it over time?
You mentioned earlier in our discussion that red flags for some 3PL logistics executives are when they go meet with a customer and the customer isn't really sure what they want or what they want to improve. It's like, how do you know you've been successful when you don't know what you're measuring? So really the first part of it is work to understand what value the customer expects. What pain is he or she trying to fix by partnering with the 3PL? And then we can develop a solution to help address that pain, and then mutually agree on what success looks like. In all of our facilities, we have metrics around safety, quality, delivery, productivity, cost, morale. They may be different or more granular on some sites than others, but that way at least we have a benchmark for, here's what the operation looked like when we started, here's how it looks over time, as hopefully we continue to improve. Oftentimes, especially if a customer is new to using a 3PL, the 3PL can bring expertise and services to the table that customer may not have themselves, to do things like lay out the facility to make it more efficient, to do a SKU rationalization analysis, zoning and slotting strategy, look at automation. Can we improve the material handling or storage equipment that we're using? And just implementing those continuous improvement methodologies that hopefully will continue to drive that improvement over time. And then future benefits may come from automation, from new disruptive technology, from doing network design, or it could just come from helping that customer look outside the box a little bit. Most customers measure labor. Now, it could be measured in terms of units or lines per hour, or it could be cost per unit, whatever it may be, but they typically know that key metric down to a hundredth of a decimal point. But at the same time, they could have material handling equipment sitting in their facility that is just costing them tens or hundreds or hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars a year because they're not taking care of it directly. So I think that's where it kind of comes in for the 3PL to become more of a valued strategic partner. Look for opportunities, not only within the specific operation that you're managing, but what else can you do to help that customer, whether it's inside the existing four walls that you're in, or in other parts of their supply chain through transportation solutions, material handling solutions, network design, real estate solutions, whatever it may be.
Yeah, no, a lot of great points. I mean, I think some of the things you mentioned that certainly I see when I talk to folks as well is, obviously like we've already talked about, understanding what the objectives are, right? And and then having that kind of define the right metrics to go about to then measure it so you can see whether you're making progress or not. And then finally, in order to sustain it, you have to drive you have to have the capabilities to drive continuous improvement. And that's that there's people involved in that, there's technology involved with that, and so forth. And I think the other point that you raised, I think it's critical, that we talked about in the beginning, which was, customers becoming more sophisticated. And one of the things they look for in a partner is, well, don't just, yes, this is what we want to do today, and this is kind of where we come at it. This is our perspective, but they're looking to the 3PL partners to, tell me something I don't already know, right? So tell me something that might be a risk to my business that maybe I'm not aware of. Tell me something that maybe others in the industry or in other industries are doing that I could implement within my own operations that might help me to create a competitive advantage or, significantly drive a step improvement in my operations. So I think that's another, component of it. In my opening comments, I talked about how there's been so much change in the industry. And I think the only thing that we know for sure heading into 2017 and beyond is that that's just going to be more and more change, going on. So, as you look ahead, I mean, how do you see, contract logistics, the value equation changing in the months and years ahead? I mean, what are some of the emerging trends, whether in technology or regulations that you think are going to impact the industry?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned earlier, due to increasing demands around cycle time reduction, around improved visibility, in regards to improving efficiency, it's going to really be incumbent upon the 3PLs to find better ways of doing things. And that's where I think really some of the new innovative tools on the market are coming into play. We're already seeing things like 3D printing and digital signage and Bluetooth product tagging being used, not just kind of lab tested, but actually being rolled out. I think we're going to see drones being used both inside as well as outside of warehouses within the next 12 to 18 months once they can get the whole battery situation figured out, as well as some other things working through the FAA. And then if we go on the transportation side, we've already seen where self-driving trucks have successfully made deliveries in the western part of the country. Convoys where two or more trucks are tied together wirelessly. We could see those on the roads in the U.S. within the next year or two, and we'll probably see driverless vehicles within 10 years. So I mean, I really believe some of these things are going to bring step change improvements, and we might be talking about some of the things I just mentioned now in 10 or 15 years, like today we would look back and talk about, EDI or RF or just things like that. They're just commonly used in warehouse environments. I think the technology is moving so quickly that if a 3PL is not already investing in many of the things I just mentioned, then they're falling behind.
So certainly technology is going to continue to play a role, and all the things you brought up, I think, are certainly things that I think every executive should have on their radar screen in terms of the potential impact that they can have. Anything on kind of the labor side, with regulations, or there's a lot of buzz today. Obviously following the election, or even leading up to the election, with minimum wage and things like that. Do you see anything going on the regulatory front that might impact kind of operations?
Well, you mentioned minimum wage, and I'll address that in a moment, but we have seen significant increases in the hourly wages, really hourly and salary wages for warehouse and 3PL employees over the past 18 to 24 months. One of our temporary labor partners does a pretty significant survey of all their associates nationwide, and within their operations, they have seen hourly warehouse worker wages increase more in the past 18 to 24 months than they did in the previous 12 years combined. So with the improving economy, with the unemployment rate now getting down to in that mid 4s to 5 level, which is really considered full employment, the number of available employees, qualified employees, is reducing. So wages have gone up significantly. We've had to have conversations with multiple customers, especially in some of the hotbeds of distribution in the U.S., like Southern California and Dallas and Chicago and Atlanta and New Jersey. Wages have gone up so much, we've had to have conversations with customers about having to increase wages to retain and attract employees. And then you mentioned the minimum wage. I mean, we'll see what's going to happen with the new administration, but if we keep marching forward to $15 an hour minimum wages in California and some other states by 2020, that is clearly going to impact our business, because if a person could go get a job theoretically at McDonald's making $15 an hour and maybe work daylight in a relatively calm environment, is he or she going to prefer that over working in a warehouse, or maybe they're having to work third shift and maybe handle heavy product and things like that? So it's definitely going to have something we need to keep an eye on. Wages have started increasing already, like I just mentioned, but if the minimum wage starts creeping up as planned, then that's only going to excel it, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, certainly a lot of things to keep on the radar in the months and years ahead. Well, Greg, we're running short on time here, so I'm just going to kind of, as a way to wrap up, I mean, what questions should companies ask themselves to assess whether they're maximizing the value that they're getting from the 3PL relationships? That's a good question, Adrian. The first thing that comes to mind is that the company should decide, is my relationship with my 3PL transactional? Am I keeping them at arm's length, or is it more of a partnership where we're invested in each other's success? If a company is primarily using a 3PL to reduce cost and outsource risk, then I feel confident in saying that they're not getting the full value from that 3PL, because that 3PL is probably either losing money or not making acceptable profits, and so therefore they're not going to be investing their resources into the business to try and improve it. A 3PL has to be profitable just the way the company does. Now that doesn't mean that a 3PL should not be asked to sacrifice profits for poor performance. I think in a healthy arrangement between a 3PL and a company, it's based on outcomes. Let's agree on what success looks like I mentioned earlier. And if we fall short of that success, Mr. 3PL, I'm expecting you to maybe sacrifice some of your margin. But if we hit that success, or better yet, even go well beyond it, I'm willing to pay you more margin, perhaps significantly more margin, because it should be structured that the customer benefits as well as a 3PL. But in a situation like that, where each customer is or each company, I should say, is mutually invested in the other's success, that gives the 3PL a clear path to invest in that relationship and get their return on investment. Yeah, that's a great point. So I'm going to squeeze one more question in, relative to what you just said there, because I heard the vested. You use the term vested, and I'm a big proponent. I'm sure you are as well, of the vested model. That Kate Vitasic and kind of had spearheaded and the various work that she's done in that area. So my question is, are you seeing the way companies procure logistics, changing in light of all the things that we talked about today? Is there still room for improvement there in terms of kind of the initial procurement process?
It's odd you mentioned vested, because you're right, I'm a big fan of it. And then you mentioned the procurement process, because unfortunately, I think they're kind of going in the wrong direction instead of in more of a convergent direction. It seems to me like procurement is becoming more actively involved in bids than they used to be. More often, it used to be you primarily be dealing with your business partner, with the shipper, and then procurement would be more of a support function. But now we're seeing procurement's becoming more involved, and as we mentioned earlier, those business partners, they're expecting you to be thought leaders and bring innovative ideas and be a strategic partner and have robust continuous improvement programs. They're expecting all that. But at the same time, our friends on the procurement side are really focused on price. And those are really competing agendas, if you will. I think there's a huge difference between price and value. I mean, the value comes from those things we just talked about, the strategic relationship, the innovation. I think that comes from looking out over the length of that 3 or 5 year agreement and say, what is this 3PL partner going to bring to me, as opposed to price, which is I need cost savings right now. So it's made it difficult because the expectations are customers want the 3PL to invest in the business, to make it to become more innovative. That could be engineering resources or network design or automation or technology, whatever it may be. But as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, if there's not a clear path for the 3PL to get their return on that investment, then it's not going to work. So, I think models like vested and other creative commercial structures are helping to bridge that gap, so that the 3PL is set up to put skin in the game, which customers fairly expect us to. If we don't perform, then we shouldn't benefit the way we expect it to. But at the same time, there needs to be the opportunity to benefit through additional profits if we're exceeding expectations. Right.
Well, I think we could probably devote a whole episode just to this whole topic. So, but I'm glad we got that in as well. So, like I always say at the end of all our episodes, Greg, we always just manage to scratch the surface on the topics. But you brought up a lot of great insights and advice here. So, thank you very much again for making the time to be with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And thank you all for joining us today on this episode. If you've got a question for Greg and you're watching this on demand, you can post that question either via the Kenco website or the Talking Logistics website. I'm sure that he would be more than happy to respond via that medium. So again, thank you all for joining us today and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.